When Jessica Cooper stood up during our anniversary dinner, champagne flute in hand, and announced she was carrying my husband's child, I didn't throw water in her face or create a scene. Instead, I smiled, finished my creme brulee, and began plotting how I would take control of Horizon Technologies, the company Nathan had built from nothing, the company he loved more than anything in this world, including me. By the time the waiter brought our check, I already knew exactly how I would dismantle my husband's world and rebuild it with me at the helm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I met Nathan Mitchell 15 years ago at a tech startup conference in San Francisco. I was there representing my investment firm, looking for promising ventures to fund. He was passionate, brilliant, and completely captivating as he pitched his vision for revolutionizing healthcare software. Within 3 hours of meeting him, I was not only convinced to invest personally in his idea, but also found myself saying yes to dinner. Within a year, we were married, and I had redirected my financial expertise to help him secure the funding that would eventually grow Horizon Technologies into a $300 million company. That night at the summit, Denver's most exclusive restaurant, was supposed to be our 12th anniversary celebration. Nathan had insisted on inviting his executive team, something about sharing our joy with the Horizon family. I should have recognized the red flag when he specifically mentioned his new executive assistant would be joining us. Jessica Cooper had only been with the company for 10 months, but she'd quickly become indispensable to Nathan, or so he claimed. The table was elegant, white linens, crystal glasses, soft lighting that made everyone look their best. I wore the sapphire earrings Nathan had given me on our 5th anniversary, though he didn't seem to notice. His attention kept drifting to Jessica, who sat 3 seats away in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Throughout the appetizers and main course, I maintained the perfect corporate wife smile, discussing the latest charity gala with Christopher Barnes's wife, and asking appropriate questions about everyone's children and vacation plans. All while noticing how Nathan's hand occasionally disappeared beneath the table, how Jessica's cheeks flushed whenever he leaned close to whisper something to her. I was taking a delicate bite of my dessert when Jessica stood, her blonde hair catching the light, her slim figure showing no signs yet of the news she was about to share. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, her voice carrying that distinctive sweetness that suddenly sounded rehearsed to my ears. "To new beginnings and family." The table raised their glasses, murmuring in polite confusion. "Nathan and I are so excited to share that we're expecting a little one in about 7 months," she continued, her eyes fixed on my husband rather than me. "We hadn't planned to announce it tonight, but what better occasion than surrounded by our closest friends?" The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye at the table turned to me, watching for the reaction, the explosion, the tears. But 15 years navigating the cutthroat world of tech investments had taught me something valuable. Never reveal your hand when you're blindsided. I set my dessert spoon down carefully. "How lovely," I said, my voice steady. "Congratulations." Nathan looked stunned at my composure. He had expected drama, outrage, perhaps even hoped for it to cast me as the unstable, jealous wife. Instead, I turned to Jessica with a placid smile. 7 months, you said? That would make you about 8 weeks along? You should be careful. With champagne toasts, then." Her smile faltered slightly as she lowered her still full glass. The dinner ended shortly after, with awkward goodbyes and averted gazes. Nathan and I rode home in separate cars, him claiming he needed to handle some things at the office. I knew exactly what things he would be handling. When I arrived home to our empty house in Cherry Creek, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a real drink, not the single glass of wine I'd nursed all evening. Then I sat on our Italian leather sofa, opened my laptop, and began my research. Most women in my position might have called a divorce attorney immediately. But I knew something they didn't. Horizon Technologies was 3 months away from a critical juncture. The board was considering an IPO that would potentially value the company at $500 million. Nathan had been the face of the company since its inception, but I had been its financial backbone in more ways than he had ever acknowledged publicly. I pulled up the company bylaws that I had helped draft years ago when Horizon was just 3 people working out of a garage. There, in Section 7, Paragraph 3, was the clause Margaret Reynolds had insisted upon, the moral conduct provision. Any executive found to be engaging in behavior that could damage the company's reputation could be removed by a 2/3 board vote. Margaret had been COO during Horizon's early days, a brilliant woman in her 60s who had survived 3 tech booms and busts. She'd retired from the executive team 2 years ago, but maintained her position on the board. She had always seen through Nathan's charm to the ambition beneath, and had taken me aside at her retirement party. "Watch him, Olivia," she'd said, her eyes sharp despite the champagne. "Men like Nathan believe their success makes them untouchable. Keep copies of everything." I had nodded politely then, thinking she was being dramatic. Now I was grateful for her foresight. I reached for my phone and scrolled to a number I rarely called. "Daniel, it's Olivia Mitchell. I know it's late, but I need your legal expertise. Can you meet me for breakfast tomorrow? It's urgent." Daniel Wong had been my friend since business school. Now one of Denver's top corporate attorneys, he had a mind like a steel trap and an ethical code that bent only for those he truly believed. Deserved his loyalty. I was one of the few. "The summit at 8?" he asked, not bothering with questions. That was Daniel, direct and efficient. "Perfect. And Daniel, this stays between us." After hanging up, I moved through our house methodically, collecting what I needed. The spare key to Nathan's home office, the passwords to our shared accounts, the investment paperwork showing my initial contribution to Horizon, funds from my personal portfolio that had never been properly documented in the company records, at Nathan's insistence. "It's cleaner this way, Liv," he'd said. "Your investment is through me as my wife. Trust me, it protects both of us." What it had done was erase my name from Horizon's founding documents, casting me as merely the supportive wife rather than a key early investor. In Nathan's office, I found what I was looking for: the original business plan, with my handwritten notes in the margins. The financial projections I had created that had convinced the first major investors to come on board. And most importantly, emails Nathan had forwarded to our home account, not realizing they contained entire conversation threads with early partners acknowledging my role. By 2 a.m. I had compiled enough to make my case, but I needed more. I needed irrefutable evidence that Nathan's affair with Jessica wasn't just a personal betrayal, but a liability to the company. I fell asleep on the couch, laptop still open, and woke at 6 to the sound of the front door. Nathan entered, his clothes wrinkled, his expression a carefully composed mask of remorse. "Olivia, we need to talk," he began, rehearsed sincerity in his voice. I closed my laptop. "Yes, we do. But not now. I have an early breakfast meeting." "A meeting? After what happened last night? Who could possibly be more important than discussing our marriage?" The entitlement in his voice confirmed what I already knew. Nathan expected forgiveness, or at least a chance to manage the situation. To him, this was an inconvenience to be handled, not a marriage destroyed. "The meeting is with Daniel Wong," I said, watching his face. "And what's important right now isn't our marriage, Nathan. It's making sure I protect what's mine." Fear flickered across his features. He knew Daniel was a shark in corporate waters. "Liv, come on. This isn't Jessica made a mistake announcing things that way. We were going to tell you privately, respectfully. You know I still care about you deeply." "Respect would have been not sleeping with your assistant," I replied, standing to leave. "Care would have been not getting her pregnant. but we can. Discuss your fascinating definition of these terms another time. I need to shower. I walked past him, calm and collected, while his world began to unravel. That was the moment I realized the power had already shifted. Nathan was accustomed to controlling every situation, to people accommodating his needs and desires. My refusal to react as expected had thrown him completely off balance. Daniel was already waiting when I arrived at the summit, a different table from last night's disaster, but with the same impeccable service. He wore his battle suit, the charcoal gray custom-tailored outfit he reserved for his most important cases. "You look terrible," he said by way of greeting, pushing a large black coffee toward me. "My husband's assistant announced she's pregnant." "With his child at our anniversary dinner last night," I replied, taking a grateful sip. "I think I'm entitled to dark circles." Daniel's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tell me everything, and don't leave out details thinking they're not relevant. I'll decide what matters legally. For the next hour, between bites of barely touched breakfast, I laid out the situation. The affair, the pregnancy announcement, and most importantly, my contributions to Horizon Technologies that had been systematically minimized in official records. I don't just want a divorce settlement, Daniel. I want what I earned. I helped build Horizon from nothing. My investment, my financial strategy, my connections. The company wouldn't exist without me. Daniel nodded slowly. This isn't just about the affair, then. The affair is my leverage. What I really want is recognition. And if Nathan won't give it willingly, I'll take it. He studied me for a moment. You're talking about a corporate takeover, not just a divorce. I'm talking about justice. I pulled out the folder I'd compiled overnight. Here's what I have so far. I need your help gathering the rest. Daniel flipped through the documents, his expression growing increasingly impressed. This is a good start. But if you want the board to remove Nathan using the moral conduct clause, we need to demonstrate that the affair with Jessica represents a genuine threat to company interests, not just poor judgment. Jessica has access to all of Nathan's emails, calendar, and files. She's been involved in IPO discussions, strategic planning, everything. She's not just any employee. She's in a position to know every company secret. That makes their relationship a massive breach of corporate governance. Good angle. Daniel made a note. We'll also need to look into whether company resources were misused. Travel expenses, gifts, any hint that he used Horizon funds to facilitate the affair. Check the Vale property records, I suggested. Horizon owns a corporate retreat cabin there. Nathan takes the executive team twice a year, but he's made several solo trips recently with Jessica for administrative support. I'm willing to bet those trips weren't properly documented. Daniel raised an eyebrow. How do you know that? Margaret Reynolds mentioned it at our last charity committee meeting. She thought it was odd that Jessica would be needed for what was supposed to be Nathan's personal creative time. Daniel smiled slightly. Speaking of Margaret, we need her on board. As the former COO and a current board member, her support would be crucial. I'm having lunch with her tomorrow, I confirmed. She's always had reservations about Nathan's management style. Too much emphasis on his public image. Not enough on sustainable growth. Perfect. Daniel closed the folder. Meanwhile, I'll start the formal divorce filing and request comprehensive discovery of all financial records. That will give us legitimate access to company documents we might otherwise struggle to obtain. How long will this take? I asked. To build a bulletproof case? 3 to 4 weeks. But Olivia, he hesitated, you need to maintain appearances during that time. If Nathan suspects what you're planning, he'll start covering his tracks, possibly removing access you currently have. I nodded, already considering how to play the role of shell-shocked but coping wife. I can do that. Nathan expects emotional collapse followed by eventual forgiveness. He thinks I'm too dependent on our lifestyle to risk losing it all. That's his first mistake, Daniel said, signaling for the check. Underestimating you. When I returned home, Nathan was waiting, a contrite expression carefully arranged on his face. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. You're right to be angry. The way you found out was terrible, and I take full responsibility for that. I set my purse down and regarded him coolly. Is Jessica moving out of your company apartment? He blinked, surprised that I knew about the downtown condo Horizon maintained for visiting executives that had become Jessica's residence 3 months ago. That's complicated, Liv. She's in a vulnerable position right now, and as the father of her child, I have certain responsibilities. Of course. I kept my voice neutral. And your responsibilities to your wife of 12 years? To the woman who helped you build your company from the ground up? That's not fair, he said, a flash of the real Nathan showing through his remorseful facade. You contributed at the beginning, yes, but Horizon's success is the result of my vision, my leadership. I smiled thinly. Is that what you tell yourself to justify erasing me from the company narrative? Interesting revision of history. I've always acknowledged your support. Support. I cut him off. That's the word, isn't it? Support. Not partnership, not co-founding, not investment. Just the supportive wife who cheered from the sidelines while you did all the real work. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration replacing his practiced contrition. What do you want from me, Olivia? A public apology? More shares in the company? Just tell me so we can move past this. I want what I earned, I said simply. But right now, I need space to think. I'll be staying at the Four Seasons for a few days. The Four Seasons? That's an unnecessary expense. I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. Your pregnant assistant is living in the company apartment that I helped pay for. I think Horizon can cover a hotel room for its most overlooked investor. I packed a suitcase with methodical precision, selecting clothes appropriate for the Gior meetings I would have over the coming days. Professional, powerful, but not flashy. Nothing that would trigger Nathan's suspicion that I was planning anything beyond nursing my wounded pride. As I zipped the suitcase closed, Nathan leaned against the doorframe watching me. The board meets next Friday to discuss the IPO timeline, he said, his tone casual but his eyes calculating. Your little hotel retreat will need to end by then. I need you beside me, presenting a united front. Do you? I smiled. How interesting that my presence suddenly matters when appearances are at stake. Don't be childish, Olivia. This IPO represents everything we've worked for. Don't let personal issues interfere with business. I wheeled my suitcase past him. I wouldn't dream of it. Business is business after all. I'll see you at the board meeting. The Four Seasons provided the perfect base for my counteroffensive. From my suite overlooking the Denver skyline, I coordinated with Daniel, gathered documentation, and prepared for my lunch with Margaret Reynolds. Margaret chose the restaurant, an understated but excellent French bistro, far from the usual tech. Crowd haunts. At 68, she remained imposing, her silver hair cut in a precise bob, her eyes missing nothing behind designer frames. I wondered when you'd call, she said as I slid into the booth across from her. Jessica's announcement wasn't exactly subtle. You knew? I asked, not entirely surprised. Margaret snorted delicately. About the affair? I suspected. Nathan has a pattern. Getting bored, seeking validation from younger admirers. The pregnancy announcement was unexpected, though. Sloppy. I studied her, this woman who had navigated the male-dominated tech world decades before it was even remotely fashionable for women to do so. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have believed me? Nathan is very good at making anyone who questions him seem jealous or irrational. She sipped her water. Besides, I learned long ago to let people discover hard truths themselves. It's the only way the lesson sticks. I nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in her approach. Well, I've discovered my hard truth. Now I need your help ensuring Nathan discovers his. Margaret smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me why competitors had nicknamed her the Velvet Hammer during her executive days. I thought you might. Tell me what you need. For the next hour, I outlined my plan. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound book. When I finished, she closed the book decisively. You'll need to address the Forrester contract situation, she said. What situation? I asked, confused. Forrester Medical Systems was Horizon's biggest client, representing nearly 30% of annual revenue. Their renewal is up next month. Nathan's been handling it personally, which is unusual. Typically, Christopher would manage accounts that size. Christopher Barnes was VP of Sales and Nathan's closest ally in the company. They'd been fraternity brothers before becoming business partners. You think there's something wrong with the renewal? Margaret shrugged. I think it's convenient that Nathan has taken personal control of our largest client relationship just before an IPO, and just as his personal life is becoming complicated. Worth investigating. I made a note to have Daniel look into the Forrester situation. Will you support a board motion to remove Nathan if we find sufficient cause? Olivia, I've been waiting 3 years for someone to finally hold that man accountable. You have my vote, and I can secure at least 2 others. That gives you 3 of the 7 you'll need for a 2/3 majority. I felt a surge of hope. Thank you, Margaret. Don't thank me yet. Nathan won't go down without a fight, and he has allies. Christopher will stand with him regardless of evidence. James Peterson will likely follow Christopher's lead. That still leaves Elizabeth Carter and Raj Patel, I mused. Elizabeth has always been professional, but distant. Raj was brought in by Nathan last year. I don't know him well. Elizabeth respects hard evidence. Present a solid case and she'll make the right decision. Raj is trickier. He admires Nathan, but he's also meticulous about governance. A demonstrable breach of fiduciary duty would concern him deeply. As our lunch concluded, Margaret fixed me with a penetrating stare. Are you prepared for what comes after, Olivia? Removing Nathan is only the first step. The company will need leadership during a critical transition. I met her gaze steadily. I'm more than prepared. I've been preparing for 15 years. Margaret nodded, satisfied. Then let's get to work. The next morning, I woke in my Four Seasons suite to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages from Nathan, each one progressively more demanding than the last, culminating in board members asking questions. Call me immediately. I smiled, taking my time with my coffee as I scrolled through the messages. The panic in his words was palpable. Good. Let him sweat. When I finally called, he answered on the first ring. Where have you been? He demanded, his voice tight. Good morning to you too, Nathan. I was sleeping. Some of us find betrayal quite exhausting. He lowered his voice, probably aware of how thin the walls were at Horizon's headquarters. This isn't funny, Olivia. Margaret Reynolds is suddenly requesting complete audits of executive expenses for the past year. The board meeting has been moved up to Monday instead of Friday. Something's happening. How concerning for you, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Perhaps you should focus on preparing your explanations rather than tracking my whereabouts. This isn't... He paused, and I could practically see him recalibrating his approach. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. Liv, please. I know I've hurt you, but this is our company. If there's some kind of financial investigation happening, we need to present a united front. Our company? I repeated, allowing a hint of bitterness to seep through. That's not what you said yesterday when you reminded me I merely contributed at the beginning. Make up your mind, Nathan. Am I a partner or a cheerleader? The line went quiet for a moment before he responded. You know how much Horizon means to both of us. Whatever personal issues we're facing, Surely we can set them aside for the sake of everything we've built. I'll see you at the board meeting on Monday, I said firmly. Until then, I suggest you review your expense reports very carefully, particularly those trips to Vail. I ended the call before he could respond, then immediately dialed Daniel. Margaret has requested the expense audits, I told him without preamble, and moved the board meeting up to Monday. Nathan's rattled. Good, Daniel replied. I've been digging into the Forrester contract situation she mentioned. There's definitely something unusual happening there. Nathan's been meeting with their CEO privately, outside normal renewal discussions. I have a contact in their legal department who might be willing to share information, but I need a few more days. We may not have days. Whatever Margaret found in those expenses must be significant for her to accelerate the timeline. Then we pivot, Daniel said decisively. We focus on what we can prove now. The misuse of company resources for the affair, Nathan's breach of the moral conduct clause, and your unacknowledged founding contributions. We can add the Forrester situation as supporting evidence if my contact comes through in time. I agreed, and spent the rest of the morning finalizing documents with Daniel. By noon, we had compiled a comprehensive presentation for the board, outlining how Nathan had systematically minimized my role while using company resources to facilitate his affair. My phone rang again. This time it was Christopher Barnes, Nathan's closest ally and VP of sales. Olivia, he began, his tone conciliatory. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Christopher. What can I do for you? Nathan is concerned about the direction this audit is taking. He asked me to reach out as a friend to both of you, to see if we might find a path forward that protects everyone's interests. I almost laughed at the transparency of the approach. Christopher had never been a friend to both of us. He was Nathan's fraternity brother, drinking buddy and enabler. How thoughtful, I replied. And what path might that be? Christopher cleared his throat uncomfortably. A private resolution. Nathan is prepared to offer a very generous settlement, 30% of his personal shares in Horizon, plus the house and investment accounts. In exchange, he would retain leadership of the company, and there would be no need for public complications. Public complications, I repeated. Is that what we're calling his affair with a direct report who now carries his child? Look, what happened with Jessica was inappropriate, no question, but the IPO represents hundreds of millions in potential value. A scandal now could devastate that potential for everyone, including you. I let the silence stretch long enough to become uncomfortable before responding. Tell Nathan I appreciate his concern for my financial well-being. Truly touching. But I'll see you both at the board meeting on Monday. After hanging up, I texted Margaret. Christopher just offered me 30% of Nathan's shares to go away quietly. They're getting desperate. Her response came almost immediately. They should be. Wait until you see the expense reports. 2 hours later, a courier arrived at my hotel suite with a thick envelope marked confidential in Margaret's precise handwriting. Inside were copies of Nathan's corporate credit card statements and expense reports for the past 18 months, with certain charges highlighted in Margaret's signature purple ink. The pattern was unmistakable. Regular charges at a jewelry store Nathan had never once visited for me. Weekend getaways to Vail coded as strategic planning sessions, but with only 2 attendees, Nathan and Jessica. A corporate apartment downtown, with utilities and housekeeping all billed to Horizon, despite the company having no legitimate need for such accommodations. But the most damning evidence was a series of invoices for consulting services from a company called JC Strategies, LLC. The invoices were vague, listing only executive support as the service provided, but the amounts were substantial, $15,000 per month for the past 10 months. A quick search revealed that JC Strategies had been incorporated in Colorado 11 months ago. The registered agent was Jessica Cooper. Nathan hadn't just been having an affair with his assistant. He'd been paying her $15,000 a month from company funds disguised as consulting fees, money that belonged to Horizon's shareholders, including me. I immediately called Daniel and forwarded him the documents. "We need to add this to the presentation," I insisted. "This goes beyond the moral conduct clause. This is financial misconduct." "This changes everything," Daniel agreed, his voice grim. These payments to JC Strategies could constitute fraud. Nathan was essentially embezzling company funds to pay his girlfriend a second salary. "Can we prove that no actual consulting work was performed?" "We don't have to. The conflict of interest alone is damning. He hired his secret girlfriend's company without disclosing their relationship to the board. That's a clear breach of fiduciary duty." I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't just about Nathan's betrayal anymore. This was about protecting Horizon from the man who claimed to love it more than anything. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We need to speak with Jessica," Daniel replied, surprising me. "These payments make her complicit in potential fraud. She might be willing to cooperate if she understands her own legal exposure." The suggestion made me uncomfortable. Despite everything, confronting the woman carrying my husband's child felt distasteful. But Daniel was right. Jessica was not just the other woman, but potentially a co-conspirator in financial misconduct. How do we approach her without tipping off Nathan? "Leave that to me," Daniel said. "I have a colleague who specializes in whistleblower cases. We'll frame the discussion as an opportunity for Jessica to protect herself by cooperating." While Daniel arranged the meeting with Jessica, I focused on preparing for the board presentation. Margaret sent word that she had secured Elizabeth Carter's support, bringing our confirmed votes to 4. We needed just one more for the 2/3 majority required to remove Nathan. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor at my hotel suite. Raj Patel, the board member I knew least well. The front desk called to announce his arrival, and I considered refusing to see him. But curiosity won out. Raj was younger than the other board members, in his mid-30s with the intense focus of someone who had built and sold 2 tech companies before joining Horizon's board. Nathan had recruited him personally, touting his fresh perspective and connections to venture capital. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began as he entered the suite, then corrected himself. "Olivia, thank you for seeing me without notice." "What can I do for you, Raj?" I gestured toward the sitting area, maintaining a professional distance. He took a seat, looking uncomfortable. "I believe you know there's an emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday." "I'm aware." "Nathan seems to think you're behind it, that you're using Margaret Reynolds to orchestrate some kind of retribution for personal matters." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what he told you?" Raj shifted in his seat. "He suggested that recent events in your marriage have led to an emotionally driven campaign against him." "How convenient," I said. Coolly, dismissing legitimate concerns about financial misconduct as a scorned wife's revenge. His eyes widened slightly. "Then you are aware of the financial issues?" I studied him carefully, trying to determine where his loyalties lay. "I'm aware of numerous concerning patterns in Nathan's leadership, both personal and financial. The board will review all evidence on Monday." Raj leaned forward, lowering his voice despite us being alone. "Olivia, I need to know. How bad is it? I joined this board because I believed in Horizon's potential. I've staked my reputation on its governance." His concern seemed genuine, and I made a split-second decision to trust him, at least partially. Nathan has been using company funds inappropriately. The moral conduct issues are problematic, but the financial improprieties are substantive. You'll see everything on Monday, but if you care about Horizon's future, you should prepare yourself for difficult decisions. Raj nodded slowly. "Nathan told me you were just the supportive wife. that you had no real involvement in Horizon's operations or founding. I smiled thinly. Nathan has been revising history for years. The board will see the complete picture on Monday. After Raj left, I called Margaret to update her on the unexpected visit. Interesting, she mused. Raj rarely makes moves without calculation. If he's approaching you directly, he's hedging his bets. Can we count on his vote? Not yet. But the fact that he sought you out suggests he's no longer firmly in Nathan's camp. That's progress. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel's meeting with Jessica had gone better than expected. Faced with evidence of her own legal exposure, she had provided a written statement confirming that JC Strategies had performed no actual consulting work for Horizon. The monthly payments had been Nathan's idea, a way to supplement her income for all she did for him personally. By Sunday night, our case against Nathan was ironclad. Financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, violation of the moral conduct clause, all meticulously documented and ready for presentation. I barely slept, rehearsing my presentation and anticipating Nathan's countermoves. He would attack my credibility, paint me as emotionally unstable, deny the financial misconduct. We had prepared for all of it. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of perfect Colorado day that usually lifted my spirits. I dressed with careful consideration, a navy blue suit that projected authority without ostentation, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Professional, composed, determined. Daniel met me in the hotel lobby, his expression serious. Ready for this? I've been ready for 15 years, I replied. I just didn't know it. Horizon's headquarters dominated a corner of downtown Denver, its glass facade reflecting the mountains in the distance. The security guard at the entrance did a double take when he saw me. I hadn't been to the office in months, having gradually been edged out of company events. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, recovering quickly, the board is already assembled in the Aspen room. Thank you, Carl. I smiled, pleased I had always made a point of knowing the staff by name, something Nathan considered beneath his pay grade. The elevator ride to the top floor gave me a moment to center myself. This wasn't just about Nathan's betrayal or my wounded pride. This was about justice. For me, for the company I had helped build, and for every person whose contributions had been minimized by Nathan's outsized ego. When the elevator doors opened, Christopher Barnes was waiting, his expression a mixture of concern and condescension. Olivia, I'm glad I caught you. The board meeting has been postponed. Perhaps we could use this time to discuss our proposal. More. The meeting hasn't been postponed, Christopher. I cut him off smoothly. In fact, Margaret texted me just minutes ago that everyone is assembled and waiting. His jaw tightened. There's been a misunderstanding then. Nathan specifically said, I'm sure he did. I stepped around him, moving toward the Aspen room, with Daniel at my side. Christopher hurried after us, pulling out his phone with barely concealed panic. The Aspen room was Horizon's showcase conference space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the mountains. Inside, 5 board members sat around the massive table of reclaimed Colorado pine that Nathan had commissioned when the company first moved into the building. Margaret Reynolds sat at the far end, directly opposite the empty chair reserved for the board chair, Nathan's seat. Elizabeth Carter and James Peterson sat to her left, Raj Patel to her right. The only person missing besides Nathan was the 7th board member, Christopher, who had just entered behind us. Olivia, Margaret greeted me with a nod. We were just discussing whether to begin without Nathan. I'm sure he'll join us momentarily, I replied, taking a seat next to Raj. Christopher was just attempting to tell me the meeting had been postponed. Christopher flushed but said nothing as he took his own seat. Elizabeth Carter, a former tech executive in her 50s with a reputation for brutal honesty, cleared her throat. While we wait for Nathan, perhaps someone could explain why we're having an emergency meeting 3 days before our regularly scheduled one. I called this meeting, Margaret said calmly, to address urgent concerns regarding certain financial irregularities and governance issues that cannot wait for the regular session. James Peterson, a venture capitalist who had been an early investor in Horizon, frowned. Financial irregularities? This is the first I'm hearing of such concerns. That's why we're meeting today, Margaret replied, to share information that has recently come to light. The door burst open, and Nathan strode in, his usual confidence visibly strained around the edges. Apologies for the delay. There seems to have been some confusion about scheduling. He took his seat at the head of the table, pointedly avoiding looking in my direction. Now, I understand Margaret has raised some concerns, but before we get into that, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. Here it comes, I thought. My wife and I are going through some personal challenges, Nathan continued, his voice taking on the sincere tone he used when asking investors for money. Olivia is understandably upset, and I fear this emergency meeting may be more about personal matters than legitimate business concerns. Margaret didn't miss a beat. Actually, Nathan, the financial documentation came to my attention through the quarterly review process, not through Olivia. But since you've raised the issue of personal and professional boundaries, perhaps that's a good place to start. She nodded to me, and I opened the presentation folder Daniel and I had prepared. Board members, what you're about to see demonstrates a pattern of behavior that violates not only Horizon's moral conduct clause, but potentially rises to the level of financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. I distributed copies of the presentation to each person, watching Nathan's face as he flipped through the pages. His expression shifted from dismissive to concerned to genuinely alarmed as he reached the section on JC strategies. This is outrageous, he sputtered, looking up. These are personal expenses that were miscoded by accounting, and this consulting arrangement was completely legitimate. Was it? I asked quietly. Because we have a sworn statement from Jessica Cooper confirming that JC Strategies performed no actual consulting work for Horizon. The monthly payments of $15,000 were your idea, Nathan, a way to supplement the income of a woman with whom you were having an affair. The room fell silent. Nathan's face drained of color as he realized the depth of the evidence against him. Elizabeth Carter broke the silence, her voice sharp. Is this true, Nathan? Have you been using company funds to pay your girlfriend? It's not that simple, Nathan began, but Christopher cut him off. This is clearly a misunderstanding, Christopher insisted. Nathan has always operated with the company's best interests at heart. These allegations are being driven by personal animosity, not facts. Raj Patel, who had been studying the document silently, looked up. The facts seem quite clear. These expense reports show a pattern of using company resources for personal purposes. The consulting payments to a company owned by a romantic partner were never disclosed to the board. These are serious governance failures. Nathan switched tactics, his voice hardening. Even if there were some accounting irregularities, they're administrative matters that can be addressed without this dramatic proceeding. As for my personal life, while I regret any pain I've caused, my relationship with Jessica has no bearing on my ability to lead this company. That's where you're wrong, I said, turning to the final section of the presentation. Your systematic misrepresentation extends beyond your personal conduct. For years, you've presented yourself as the sole visionary behind Horizon, erasing the contributions of others, particularly mine. I distributed the final set of documents, the original business plan with my handwritten notes, the initial investor presentations I had created, and emails confirming my role in securing the funding that launched Horizon. These documents show that I wasn't just the supportive wife, as Nathan has characterized me. I was a founding investor, strategic planner, and key relationship manager during Horizon's critical early years. My financial contribution came from my personal portfolio, not joint marital funds. Yet Nathan systematically removed my name from company records, presenting himself as the sole founder and visionary. James Peterson examined the documents with growing discomfort. He had been one of the first venture capitalists to invest in Horizon, largely based on the financial projections and business plan I had presented to him. "I remember these meetings," he admitted. Olivia was indeed present and active in the discussions. I had assumed, based on subsequent communications, that her role had changed over time. "It changed because Nathan changed the narrative," Margaret stated firmly. "Which brings us to the matter at hand. Nathan's conduct, both the misuse of company funds and the affair with a direct report, violates Section 7, Paragraph 3 of our bylaws, the moral conduct provision." Nathan leaned forward, desperation edging into his voice. "This is absurd. You're considering removing me based on a personal matter and some accounting errors? I built this company from nothing. We're 3 months away from an IPO that could value Horizon at $500 million. You need me to make that happen." "Do we?" Margaret asked, looking around the table. "Or do we need ethical leadership that respects governance principles and recognizes the contributions of others?" Christopher jumped in, his loyalty to Nathan overriding his business sense. "This is a coup, plain and simple. Olivia is using her personal grievances to manipulate the board. Nathan has given everything to this company: his vision, his leadership, his life. While billing his girlfriend's consulting company $150,000 from corporate funds," Elizabeth added dryly. The debate continued for another hour, growing increasingly heated as Nathan and Christopher fought desperately to reframe the narrative. But the evidence was irrefutable. The financial misconduct alone would have been concerning. Combined with the moral conduct violations and the systematic erasure of my contributions, it painted a damning picture of Nathan's leadership. Finally, Margaret called for the vote. "The motion before the board is to remove Nathan Mitchell as CEO of Horizon Technologies, effective immediately, based on violations of the moral conduct provision and evidence of financial impropriety." The room fell silent as Margaret polled each member by name. Margaret Reynolds. She looked directly at Nathan. "Yes." Elizabeth Carter. The former tech executive nodded firmly. "Yes." Raj Patel. He hesitated, glancing between Nathan and me. "Based on the evidence presented today, yes." James Peterson. The venture capitalist sighed heavily. "This pains me, but..." "Yes." Christopher Barnes. Nathan's friend glared at me. "Absolutely not. This is a travesty." Nathan Mitchell. Margaret turned to him last, though his vote was largely symbolic at this point. Nathan stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This company is my life. I built it from nothing. Without me, Horizon is nothing." "That's not a valid vote," Margaret noted calmly. "For the record, the motion passes with 4 votes in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention. Nathan Mitchell is removed as CEO of Horizon Technologies, effective immediately." Christopher stood as well, his face flushed with anger. "This isn't over. The shareholders won't stand for this, not with the IPO so close." "The shareholders will certainly be interested in how their investment has been managed," Elizabeth replied coolly, "including the $150,000 paid to the CEO's girlfriend for non-existent consulting services." Nathan turned to me, all pretense of composure gone. "Are you happy now, Olivia? You've destroyed everything we built because I made one mistake." "No, Nathan," I replied calmly. "You destroyed what we built when you decided I didn't deserve credit for my contributions. The affair was just the final evidence of your character." Margaret called the meeting back to order. "We now need to address immediate leadership succession. Given the proximity to our IPO, continuity and stability are essential." James Peterson nodded. "We need someone who understands the company's History has the financial acumen to guide us through the IPO and can restore confidence in Horizon's governance. I nominate Olivia Mitchell as interim CEO, Margaret said, her voice clear and confident. Nathan laughed bitterly. You can't be serious. She has no operational experience in this industry. Actually, Raj interjected, according to the documentation we just reviewed, Mrs. Mitchell was instrumental in Horizon's founding and early growth. Her financial background is exactly what we need during the IPO process. And unlike you, Nathan, she has demonstrated integrity. Christopher shook his head. What? This is ridiculous. I refuse to participate in this farce. Elizabeth looked at him sharply. Your loyalty to Nathan is admirable, Christopher, but your duty is to this company and its shareholders. If you cannot separate the two, perhaps you should consider whether your continued service on this board is appropriate. The vote for my appointment was quick and decisive. 4 in favor, Christopher against, and Nathan storming out before his vote could be recorded. Just like that, 15 years after helping to found Horizon Technologies only to be gradually erased from its story, I became its CEO. As the meeting adjourned, Margaret stayed behind while the others filed out, some still processing the dramatic shift in leadership. Congratulations, she said simply, though I suspect the hard part is just beginning. I looked out the window at the mountains in the distance, their permanence a stark contrast to the seismic changes that had just occurred in this room. Nathan? Won't go quietly, I acknowledged. Of course not. Margaret smiled grimly. But you didn't expect him to, did you? No. I gathered my documents, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. But I've spent 15 years watching him lead. I know exactly what not to do. Margaret nodded approvingly. Your first order of business should be the Forrester contract. Whatever Nathan was planning there needs to be examined immediately. And Jessica? Margaret's expression softened slightly. That's complicated, both professionally and personally. She's complicit in the financial impropriety, but she's also carrying a child who will be connected to Horizon's history, like it or not. I hadn't allowed myself to think too deeply about that reality, that Nathan's child with Jessica would always be a living reminder of his betrayal. But Margaret was right. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about navigating complex human relationships while protecting the company we had all worked to build. One step at a time, I said finally. First, I need to address the executive team and stabilize the company. Then, we can deal with the personal complications. As I walked out of the Aspen room, now the CEO of Horizon Technologies, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and apprehension. Nathan had lost everything he truly valued. His position, his power, his carefully constructed image as the visionary founder. I had gained recognition of my contributions and the opportunity to lead the company into its next chapter. But the victory felt incomplete, shadowed by the personal loss and the knowledge that the hardest challenges still lay ahead. Nathan wouldn't simply accept defeat. The IPO remained a looming deadline. And somewhere in Denver, a young woman carried a child that would forever connect our lives, regardless of what happened to our marriage or the company. I took the elevator down to the executive floor, where my new office, Nathan's former domain, awaited. The team would be gathering, hungry for explanation, reassurance, direction. Some would be loyal to Nathan, others uncertain about this sudden change. A few perhaps quietly relieved. Leading them all would require more than righteous anger or the satisfaction of justice served. It would demand the vision, strategic thinking, and relationship-building skills I had contributed silently for years. Only now, I wouldn't be in the background. I would be exactly where I belonged, at the helm of the company I had helped create. As the elevator doors opened to a corridor of curious, concerned faces, I straightened my shoulders and stepped forward. The next chapter was about to begin. My first week as CEO of Horizon Technologies passed in a whirlwind of meetings, damage, control and strategic planning. The news of Nathan's removal had spread through the company like wildfire, with reactions ranging from shock to quiet celebration. I had underestimated how many employees had grown weary of Nathan's leadership, style, his tendency to take credit for others' work, his favoritism, his increasingly erratic decision-making. The executive team meeting on my first official day revealed the depth of the challenges ahead. I had chosen to gather everyone in the glass-walled conference room adjacent to my new office, Nathan's old space, which I had immediately ordered, redecorated. His collection of awards and ego-stroking photos with tech celebrities had been replaced with artwork from local Colorado artists and a single-framed document, the original Horizon business plan with both our names on it. "Before we begin," I said, looking around the table at the mixture of curiosity and wariness on the executives' faces, "I want to address the obvious. Yes, Nathan has been removed as CEO. Yes, I am now leading this company. And yes, there are personal elements to this transition that are uncomfortable for everyone." Ryan Hernandez, our Chief Technology Officer, shifted in his seat. Mrs. Mitchell. "Olivia is fine," I interjected with a smile. He nodded. "Olivia, the team is confused. The official announcement mentioned governance concerns, but rumors are flying. People are worried about the IPO, about their stock options, about the company's future." "That's understandable," I acknowledged. "Transparency will be one of my priorities as CEO, starting now." Nathan was removed due to financial improprieties and violations of our moral conduct policies. Specifically, he was using company funds to pay his girlfriend, his assistant Jessica, Cooper, through a shell consulting company. Additionally, he was using corporate resources to facilitate their relationship. The room went silent. Several executives exchanged glances, and I could read their expressions clearly. Some were surprised, others decidedly were not. Emily Chen, our VP of Product Development, spoke up. Those of us who worked closely with Nathan, some of us, suspected inappropriate behavior, but the financial aspect is shocking. "It shouldn't be," said Diane Foster, our CFO, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I flagged those consulting payments 3 times for review. Each time, Nathan insisted they were legitimate and necessary." I turned to Diane. "Which brings me to my first priority as CEO, a complete audit of our financials, especially with the IPO approaching. Diane, I want you to bring in an independent firm. No restrictions, complete access." She nodded, visibly relieved. "I've wanted to do that for months." "My second priority is addressing the Forrester contract," I continued. "It's our largest client relationship, representing 30% of our revenue, and the renewal is pending." Nathan was handling it personally, which was unusual. This caught everyone's attention. Client relationships typically fell under the sales department, headed by Christopher Barnes, who was conspicuously absent from this meeting. Ryan frowned. "Why would Nathan take that on directly? And where is Christopher?" "Both excellent questions," I replied. "Christopher has taken a leave of absence to consider his position with the company. As for why Nathan was managing Forrester directly, that's exactly what we need to find out. What do we know about the renewal status?" Emily looked uncomfortable. "I attended one meeting with Nathan and Forrester's CTO last month. They were discussing significant changes to our service agreement, but Nathan asked me to leave before the details were finalized. He said he'd brief the team later, but that never happened." My instincts, already on high alert, sharpened further. "Diane, I need all correspondence between Nathan and Forrester for the past 6 months. Ryan, I want a technical assessment of any custom work or modifications we've promised them, and I need to speak with their CEO directly." The rest of the meeting focused on stabilizing operations and reassuring employees. I announced an all-hands meeting for the following day, established daily executive briefings until the transition settled, and assigned clear accountability for IPO preparations. As the team filed out, Diane lingered behind. Once we were alone, she closed the door and turned to me, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low. "Something I couldn't say in front of the others." I gestured for her to sit. "I'm listening." 2 months ago, I discovered some irregularities in our financial projections for the IPO. The growth forecasts Nathan was presenting to potential underwriters were significantly more aggressive than our internal models justified. I felt a chill. Inflated projections for an IPO weren't just unethical, they could be illegal. How significant are we talking? Diane pulled out her tablet and brought up a spreadsheet. Our actual growth rate has been steady at 22–24% annually. The projections Nathan was using suggested 35 to 40% for the next 3 years. Based on what? That's just it, she said, frustration evident in her voice. When I questioned the assumptions, he cited the Forrester contract renewal as the primary driver, claiming they were expanding their implementation to 3 times the current size. The pieces were starting to fit together. But you haven't seen the actual renewal terms. No. Nathan insisted they were still being finalized, but that we could trust the projections. Did you document your concerns? Diane smiled thinly. Every email, every conversation. I've been covering myself for months. I can have the complete file on your desk within the hour. Do it, I said, already mentally revising my priority list. And Diane, thank you for your integrity. It can't have been easy standing up to Nathan. It wasn't, she admitted. But I've been in this industry too long to risk my reputation on cooked books. Besides, she added with a hint of satisfaction, working for someone who actually listens will be a refreshing change. After Diane left, I sat in the CEO's chair, my chair now, and contemplated the growing complications. If Nathan had been inflating growth projections based on a Forrester contract renewal that didn't actually include the promised expansion, we were facing more than an uncomfortable leadership transition. We could be looking at securities fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Nathan's attorney reached out. They want to discuss a settlement. I replied, new complications. Emerging. Possible securities issues with IPO projections. Come to the office, ASAP. Within an hour, Daniel arrived, and I briefed him on Diane's revelations. His expression grew increasingly grave. This changes everything, he said. If Nathan was knowingly presenting fraudulent projections to potential IPO underwriters, that's a criminal matter. The SEC would take a very dim view. Could this derail the IPO completely? Daniel considered. Not necessarily, but it would require immediate corrective disclosure and likely a delay while the financials are re-verified. The bigger question is whether Nathan's actions contaminate the entire process. And what about that settlement his attorney mentioned? Daniel's smile was cold. If he's trying to settle now, he doesn't know we've discovered the IPO projection issues. That gives us significant leverage. He probably thinks this is still about the affair and the JC Strategies payments. So we let him think that while we investigate further, I concluded. Exactly. Agree to preliminary discussions but drag them out. Meanwhile, we need to move quickly on the Forrester contract situation. If there's any validity to the expansion Nathan was projecting, we need to secure it legitimately. If not, we need to correct the record before the IPO process advances further. I nodded, then pulled up my calendar. Forrester's CEO, William Turner, is an old-school executive. He values personal relationships. I need to meet with him directly, but I can't give Nathan's attorney time to warn him or spin the situation. How fast can you set it up? I thought for a moment. Bill and I served on a charity board together years ago. before Nathan gradually pushed me out of Horizon's external relationships. I think he'd take my call. Daniel nodded. Do it. The sooner we understand what's actually happening with the Forrester renewal, the better positioned we'll be to address both the IPO issues and Nathan's settlement overtures. I placed the call as soon as Daniel left, half expecting to be routed through multiple assistants. To my surprise, Bill Turner picked up on the second ring. Olivia Mitchell, he said, his deep voice carrying a note of curiosity. This is unexpected. I heard there were some changes at Horizon. News travels fast, I replied. Yes, I've stepped in as CEO following Nathan's departure. Which is actually why I'm calling. I'd like to meet to discuss the Forrester contract renewal. There was a pause. I see. Nathan assured me just last week that everything was proceeding smoothly despite any leadership adjustments. The fact that Nathan had spoken with Bill recently, after his removal, sent up immediate red flags. I'm afraid Nathan may have misrepresented several things, Bill. The leadership change isn't an adjustment. It's a complete transition following board action, and I have concerns about the renewal terms he may have discussed with you. Another pause, longer this time. I think we should meet in person, Olivia. My office tomorrow morning? I'll be there, I promised. After hanging up, I immediately called Margaret to update her on the developing complications. Securities fraud, she repeated, her voice hardening. I suspected Nathan was taking shortcuts, but this is beyond the pale. Do we need to alert the SEC proactively? Daniel advises holding off until we have a complete understanding of the situation. If we disclose prematurely and it turns out the Forrester expansion is real, we could unnecessarily damage the company. And if it's not real? Then we make a clean breast of it, correct the projections, and accept the IPO delay. Better that than risking fraud charges. Margaret was silent for a moment. You know this could seriously impact the company's valuation. The board brought you in to stabilize Horizon, but this could send us into a tailspin. I'm aware, I said calmly. But I'd rather lead a smaller, ethical company than preside over a house of cards. Wouldn't you? Her laugh was short but genuine. And that, Olivia, is why you should have been CEO from the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at Forrester's headquarters 30 minutes early, using the time to center myself and review the notes Diane had prepared on our current contract. Forrester Medical Systems occupied a sprawling campus in the Denver Tech Center, their modern buildings a testament to their position as the nation's largest healthcare management systems provider. Bill Turner's office reflected his personality. Traditional, substantial, but without ostentation. The man himself rose from behind his desk when his assistant showed me in, extending his hand with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Olivia, it's been too long, though I confess, I didn't expect our reunion to occur under these circumstances. Neither did I admitted, taking the offered seat, but I appreciate you making time on short notice. Bill settled back, studying me. I've known you for 7 years? Always found you to be straightforward and sharp, so I'm going to extend the same courtesy. What the hell is going on at Horizon? One day Nathan's telling me everything's on track for our expansion agreement. The next I hear he's out and his wife, you, is CEO. I appreciated the directness. The simple version? Nathan was removed by the board for financial improprieties and ethical violations. The complicated version involves him using company funds to pay his pregnant girlfriend and systematically misrepresenting certain business matters, potentially including the Forrester renewal. Bill's eyebrows shot up. Pregnant girlfriend? That's unexpected. It was unexpected for me too, I said dryly, especially when she announced it at our anniversary dinner. He winced. I apologize. That was insensitive of me. I waved his concern away. Personal drama aside, I'm here because I need to understand exactly what arrangements Nathan made regarding the contract renewal. Our records show some discrepancies. Bill's expression shifted from sympathetic to guarded. What sort of discrepancies? Nathan has been telling our financial team that Forrester is planning to triple its implementation of our MediSync platform as part of the renewal. That projected expansion forms the basis of our growth forecasts for our upcoming IPO. But our product team hasn't been briefed on any technical requirements for an expansion of that scale. Bill was silent for a long moment, then reached for his phone. Janet, could you bring in the Horizon contract file? All of it, including the draft renewal terms. He hung up and looked at me steadily. That's a significant disparity, Olivia. I'm aware and deeply concerned. When his assistant returned with a thick folder, Bill dismissed her and closed the door before spreading the documents between us. These are the current terms we're operating under, he began, pointing to the existing contract. And these are the renewal terms Nathan and I have been discussing. I scanned the draft renewal quickly, my heart sinking as I confirmed my suspicions. There's no expansion here. This is essentially a continuation of current services with standard inflationary adjustments. Bill nodded slowly. That's correct. We discussed potential expansion of MediSync to our West Coast facilities, but only as a possible Phase 2, contingent on performance metrics and additional budget approvals. That would be at least 24 months out, with no guaranteed volume. But Nathan has been telling our financial team, and potentially our IPO underwriters, that this expansion is confirmed and imminent. That it would triple our revenue from Forrester within the next fiscal year. Bill's expression darkened. That is categorically false. We have no board approval for such an expansion, no budget allocated, and certainly no agreement with Horizon. If Nathan represented otherwise to financial institutions, it would constitute fraud, I finished quietly. Yes. Bill leaned back, his face troubled. Olivia, I've worked with Horizon since your early days. Your platform is integral to our operations. But this is serious enough that I need to involve our legal team. I understand completely. In fact, I encourage it. Horizon is committed to transparent and ethical business practices under my leadership. We'll cooperate fully with any inquiry. He studied me for a moment. You know this could impact the renewal entirely. Our legal department might advise pausing until this situation is resolved. I know, I acknowledged. But I'd rather lose the contract than maintain it under false pretenses. That said, I hope we can work through this together. Horizon's platform delivers real value to Forrester, and our team is committed to your success. The tension in Bill's shoulders eased slightly. That's refreshingly direct. Nathan would have been spinning tales by now. I'm not Nathan, I said simply. Bill nodded. Clearly not. All right, here's what I propose. We'll proceed with the renewal on current terms, but place a 90-day review clause that allows either party to renegotiate based on the outcomes of any investigations. Meanwhile, I'll have our legal team document exactly what was discussed regarding expansion, in case it becomes relevant to any securities inquiries. It was a better outcome than I had dared hope for. That's more than fair, Bill. Thank you. As we wrapped up our meeting, Bill walked me to the elevator. For what it's worth, Olivia, I always wondered why you stepped back from Horizon's operations. During those early discussions, you had a clearer grasp of both the technical and financial aspects than Nathan ever did. That makes two of us, I replied with a small smile. But I'm where I need to be now. I returned to Horizon's offices and immediately called an emergency meeting with Daniel, Diane, and Margaret. The news was simultaneously worse than we'd feared, and better than it might have been. Nathan had indeed been misrepresenting the Forrester expansion, but we'd caught it before the IPO process advanced to a point of no return, and Forrester was willing to maintain their relationship with us under revised expectations. We need to inform the board immediately, Margaret said, and likely the SEC as well. Self-disclosure of these issues will look better than having them discovered during due diligence. Diane nodded in agreement. I'll prepare revised projections, based on actual contract terms and realistic growth metrics. We're still a valuable company with strong fundamentals. We just need to be honest about our trajectory. What about Nathan? Daniel asked. This changes his legal exposure significantly. Securities fraud carries criminal penalties. I considered our options carefully. We need to document everything meticulously. Nathan's attorney reached out about a settlement. We should schedule that meeting now, but not reveal what we've discovered. I want to understand his position before we show our hand. Risky, Margaret cautioned. If he gets wind of the Forrester situation, he might flee. Nathan won't run, I said confidently. His ego wouldn't allow it. Besides, where would he go? His entire identity is bound up in being the founder and visionary behind Horizon. He'll fight, not flee. Daniel nodded. I agree. Let's set the meeting for tomorrow. I'll bring the settlement paperwork he's expecting, but we'll be prepared to pivot depending on what he reveals. As the others left to tackle their respective tasks, I remained in my office, staring out at the mountains in the distance. The situation had grown far more complex than a simple case of infidelity and corporate misuse. Nathan hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd potentially committed crimes that could destroy the company we'd built. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. We need to talk. About the baby. About Nathan. About everything. Jessica. I stared at the message, my immediate instinct to ignore it. What could Jessica possibly have to say that would matter now? But something, curiosity, perhaps, or a deeper need to understand, made me respond. When and where? The reply came quickly. Tonight, 7 p.m., the coffee shop on 17th and Pearl. Just me, I promise. I hesitated, then typed, I'll be there. The coffee shop was deliberately neutral territory, neither upscale enough to be in Nathan's regular rotation, nor so downscale as to be uncomfortable. When I arrived, Jessica was already there, seated in a corner booth, a glass of water in front of her. She looked different than she had at that fateful dinner, less polished, more human. Her designer dress had been replaced by simple maternity jeans and a loose sweater, her perfect makeup absent. She stood awkwardly as I approached. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I replied honestly, sliding into the seat across from her. What did you want to discuss? Jessica's hands fidgeted with her water glass. First, I want to apologize, not just for the affair, but for how I told you. That dinner. It was cruel and unnecessary. Nathan said it would be better to do it publicly, to control the narrative. I should have refused. Her words confirmed what I had suspected. The public announcement had been deliberately calculated to humiliate me. Why did you agree to it? I asked, genuinely curious. She looked down. Because I believed him when he said it was the right way to handle things. Because I thought. She trailed off. You thought he loved you, I finished for her. Her eyes met mine, vulnerable and ashamed. Yes. But these past few weeks have shown me who he really is. The way he's handled everything. The company, the pregnancy, you. It's opened my eyes. In what way? Jessica took a deep breath. After you confronted him about the consulting payments, he tried to convince me to take full responsibility. He wanted me to tell the board it was my idea, that I had manipulated him into approving the contracts. That sounded exactly like Nathan, always looking for someone else to blame. And did you? No. That's why I gave that statement to your lawyer. But there's more you need to know. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thumb drive. This contains emails and documents about the Forrester contract. Nathan has been lying to everyone. Forrester, Horizon, the potential IPO underwriters. He promised them expansion terms he knew weren't real. I kept my expression neutral. not revealing that we'd already confirmed this information. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. "And because I'm having his child, and I don't want my baby's father to end up in prison for fraud. If the company discloses this now, proactively, there's a chance for damage control. If it comes out during SEC scrutiny of the IPO." I took the thumb drive, studying her carefully. "You seem to know a lot about securities law for an executive assistant." A small, rueful smile crossed her face. "I have a law degree from Columbia. I specialized in securities regulation before I burned out at a New York firm and moved to Denver for a fresh start. Nathan doesn't know. He never bothered to read my full resume. He just saw a pretty face who was willing to admire him." The revelation shifted my perception of Jessica completely. Not just the other woman, a trained legal mind who had recognized Nathan's fraud for what it was. "Why are you really here, Jessica? The truth, please." She met my gaze steadily. "Because I'm trying to do the right thing, for the baby, for myself, and yes, even for you. What Nathan did to both of us was manipulative and wrong. I can't undo the personal damage, but I can help prevent the professional catastrophe he's created. And what do you want in return?" "Nothing from you," she said quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness or friendship, but I do want assurance that when Horizon discloses these issues to the SEC, they make it clear that I was not complicit in the fraud. I can't risk my law license, especially now that I'll be a single mother." I raised an eyebrow. "Single mother? I thought Nathan was planning to handle everything and figure it out together." Jessica laughed bitterly. "That lasted about as long as his CEO position. Once he realized I wouldn't lie to the board about the consulting payments, he started pulling away. Last week, he informed me that he needed to focus on his legal defense and suggested I consider all options regarding the pregnancy." The callousness was breathtaking but not surprising. Nathan had always discarded people when they no longer served his purposes. "I'm keeping the baby," Jessica added firmly, "and I'll manage without him. But I wanted you to have this information directly from me, not filtered through attorneys." I studied her for a long moment, reassessing everything I thought I knew about the woman across from me. Yes, she had made terrible choices in becoming involved with my husband. But there was a directness in her manner now that suggested genuine remorse and a desire to rectify at least some of the damage. "Thank you for this," I said, pocketing the thumb drive. "I'll make sure the legal team knows you cooperated voluntarily." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "There's one more thing you should know. Nathan has been meeting with Christopher Barnes daily. I overheard enough to know they're planning something, some kind of counter-move. They mentioned proxy votes and shareholder pressure. I don't know the details, but they're not accepting defeat." This wasn't surprising, but the confirmation was valuable. "When did you last hear them discussing this?" "Yesterday. Christopher came to Nathan's condo while I was picking up my things. They didn't know I could hear them from the bedroom." I nodded, mentally adding this to my growing list of concerns. "Is there anything else I should know?" Jessica hesitated, then shook her head. "No. I've told you everything significant." As we prepared to leave, an awkward silence fell between us. Two women connected by circumstances neither would have chosen, trying to navigate an impossible situation with whatever dignity remained. "I am sorry," Jessica said quietly, "for all of it." "I believe you," I replied. And surprisingly, I did. "Take care of yourself, and the baby." I watched her leave, this woman who had announced her pregnancy with my husband at our anniversary dinner just weeks ago, now an unexpected ally in untangling the mess Nathan had created. The thumb drive in my pocket contained evidence that would corroborate what we'd already discovered from Forrester, strengthening our position for whatever came next. Back in my car, I called Daniel. We need to move up the timeline. Jessica just gave me additional evidence of the Forrester fraud, and she says Nathan and Christopher are planning some kind of shareholder action. Proxy fight, Daniel replied immediately. They'll try to rally shareholders against the board's decision, claiming the leadership change endangers the IPO prospects. Can they succeed? Not if we disclose the fraud issues first. No rational shareholder would support returning a CEO who misrepresented financial projections to underwriters. Then we move now, I decided. Call the board for an emergency session first thing tomorrow. We disclose everything, revise the projections, and get ahead of whatever Nathan and Christopher are planning. As I drove home to my empty house, Nathan had moved out to a downtown condo. I felt a strange sense of clarity. The path forward was complicated and would likely be painful for Horizon in the short term. The IPO would be delayed, our valuation adjusted downward, our reputation requiring careful rehabilitation. But for the first time since Jessica's announcement at that disastrous dinner, I wasn't reacting to Nathan's actions. I was charting my own course, protecting the company I had helped build, establishing ethical leadership, creating something sustainable from the wreckage of Nathan's deceptions. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: the board disclosure, the SEC notification, the inevitable public scrutiny. But tonight, driving through the Denver darkness with mountains silhouetted against the night sky, I felt something unexpected: freedom. Nathan had betrayed me, tried to erase me, attempted to reduce me to the role of supportive wife rather than founding partner. Now I was reclaiming not just my rightful position, but my vision for what Horizon could be. A company built on integrity, innovation, and authentic relationships. Let Nathan and Christopher plot their counter-moves. I had truth on my side, and a growing certainty that whatever came next, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The emergency board meeting began at 7 a.m. sharp. The early hour hadn't deterred. Full attendance. Even Christopher Barnes had returned from his leave of absence to sit scowling at the far end of the table. I suspected Nathan's influence in his sudden reappearance. Thank you all for accommodating this urgent session, I began, meeting each board member's eyes as I spoke. We've discovered serious issues that require immediate attention and disclosure. Margaret nodded encouragingly, while Raj and Elizabeth exchanged concerned glances. James Peterson looked tired, as if he hadn't slept well. Christopher's hostility was palpable. As you know, we've been conducting a thorough review of company operations since the leadership transition. What we've found regarding the Forrester contract and our IPO projections is troubling. I laid out the facts methodically: the misrepresented expansion, the inflated growth projections, the potential securities implications, while Daniel distributed documentation packages containing the evidence, including the materials Jessica had provided. In essence, I concluded, Nathan was presenting growth forecasts to potential IPO underwriters that were based on a Forrester expansion that doesn't exist and was never formally agreed to. This constitutes a material misrepresentation that could be construed as securities fraud. The silence that followed was profound. Even Christopher looked shaken. Elizabeth Carter was the first to recover. What is our exposure here? Daniel stepped in. If we self-disclose to the SEC immediately and revise all projections before the IPO process advances further, we can mitigate the legal risk significantly. There would likely be penalties and certainly a delay in the offering, but we could avoid the most severe consequences. And if we don't? James asked. Criminal fraud charges for those involved in creating or knowingly presenting the false projections, Daniel replied bluntly, plus shareholder lawsuits, regulatory penalties, and potentially catastrophic damage to the company's reputation and valuation. Christopher finally spoke up. This is absurd. Nathan wouldn't jeopardize the company he built. There must be some misunderstanding about the Forrester discussions. I slid a document across the table. This is a statement from William Turner, CEO of Forrester, confirming that no expansion agreement was reached or imminent. He's prepared to testify to that effect if necessary. Christopher paled visibly as he scanned the document. Margaret leaned forward. I motion that we authorize immediate disclosure to the SEC and issue revised projections based on accurate growth forecasts. Second, said Raj quickly. Christopher raised a hand in weak protest. Shouldn't we at least hear Nathan's explanation first? He may have had ongoing discussions with Forrester that weren't formalized yet. Bill Turner and I went through every communication, I countered. There was never any substantive discussion of an immediate threefold expansion. Nathan? Invented it to inflate our valuation. The legal reality is clear, Daniel added. Delay increases our collective liability. As board members, you have fiduciary duties that could be compromised by failing to act on this information. That settled it. The vote was unanimous, even Christopher recognizing the futility of opposition in the face of such overwhelming evidence. There's one more matter, I said once the disclosure motion had passed. We have reason to believe Nathan and Christopher are planning some form of shareholder action to challenge the leadership transition. All eyes turned to Christopher, who shifted uncomfortably. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I pulled out my phone and played a recording Jessica had provided. Christopher's voice clearly discussing strategy with Nathan, mentioning proxy solicitations and shareholder pressure. Christopher's face flushed with anger. You're spying? On private conversations now? No. Jessica Cooper happened to overhear while collecting her belongings. She felt obligated to report potential actions against the company's interests. James Peterson looked troubled. Christopher, is this true? Are you coordinating with Nathan to undermine the board's decision? Christopher glanced around the table, evidently realizing he'd lost any potential allies. Nathan built this company. He deserves the chance to defend himself before everything he's worked for is taken away. Nathan committed fraud, Elizabeth stated flatly. The company needs to distance itself from him, not rally behind him. Christopher, Margaret said with surprising gentleness, your loyalty to your friend is admirable, but your duty is to this company and its shareholders. You need to decide where your true allegiance lies. He stood abruptly. I need some air. After he left, the board continued discussing next steps. The SEC disclosure process, communications strategy for employees and stakeholders, revised timeline for the IPO. We should prepare for significant turbulence, I acknowledged. Our valuation will take a hit. Some investors may back out, but Horizon's fundamentals remain strong. We have market-leading products, loyal customers, and talented people. We can weather this storm if we stick to our principles. The meeting adjourned with clear action items assigned. As the others filed out, Margaret stayed behind. Christopher will resign, she predicted. He knows his position is untenable now. Probably, I agreed. But Nathan won't give up so easily. The SEC disclosure will humiliate him publicly. His reputation in the tech community will be devastated. Making him more dangerous, Margaret observed. Wounded egos lash out unpredictably, which is why we need to move quickly on all fronts. The sooner we disclose, the less time he has to mount any counter-moves. I spent the next hours coordinating with our legal team and the independent auditors Diane had brought in. By mid-afternoon, our disclosure document was ready for submission to the SEC. Our PR team had prepared statements for employees, clients, and the media. The machinery of damage control was in full motion. Just as I was reviewing the final disclosure draft, my assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Jessica Cooper. She entered my office hesitantly, looking pale and drawn. I'm sorry to come unannounced. I tried calling, but it went to voicemail. It's been a busy day, I replied, gesturing for her to sit. Is everything all right? No, she said simply. Nathan confronted me this morning. Someone told him I gave you information About the Forrester contract and the recordings of his conversations with Christopher. He was threatening. My concern sharpened. Threatening how? He implied I could be charged as an accomplice in the financial matters since I processed some of the paperwork. He said if I testified against him, he'd make sure I lost my law license. And She paused, placing a protective hand over her slightly rounded abdomen. He said he'd fight for full custody once the baby is born, that he'd use his resources to paint me as an unstable gold digger. The calculated cruelty was pure Nathan. When cornered, he always sought leverage to control those around him. Did he threaten you physically? Not explicitly, but he was so cold, so different from the man I thought I knew. It frightened me. I considered our options. Have you documented these threats? She nodded. I recorded our conversation. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings. Smart, I acknowledged. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Someone Nathan doesn't know about? My sister lives in Boulder. I could go there. That would be wise, at least temporarily. And Jessica, the SEC disclosure is happening today. Once it becomes public, Nathan's focus will likely shift from you to damage control for himself. Relief flickered across her face. That's actually why I came. I wanted to know if there was anything else I could do to help, not just for legal protection, but because it's the right thing to do. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Whatever her initial motivations in becoming involved with Nathan, she was trying to make amends in the only ways available to her. The documentation you've already provided is extremely valuable, but there is one more thing. Would you be willing to make a formal statement to the SEC about when and how you became aware of the Forrester misrepresentations? Of course, she agreed without hesitation. Whatever they need. As she stood to leave, an awkward silence fell between us. The bizarre reality of our situation, CEO and the pregnant mistress of my husband, now unlikely allies against his misconduct, seemed to hit us both simultaneously. This isn't how I imagined my life would turn out, Jessica said quietly. None of us did, I replied, surprising myself with the absence of bitterness in my voice. But we can only move forward from where we are, not from where we thought we'd be. She nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing her face. Wise words. I'll remember that. After Jessica left, I finalized the SEC disclosure and authorized its submission. Within hours, the news would begin circulating through financial circles, eventually reaching mainstream business media. Nathan's fraudulent projections would become public knowledge, as would the board's decision to remove him and install me as CEO. There was one more person I needed to speak with before the storm broke. I called Daniel and asked him to set up a meeting with Nathan. Are you sure that's wise? He asked cautiously. Probably not, I admitted. But I want him to hear this from me directly. Not from the media, not from his attorney, from me. Daniel sighed. I understand. I'll arrange it, but I'm coming with you. Nathan chose the meeting location, an upscale bar in one of Denver's trendiest hotels. No doubt he thought the public setting would constrain my reactions. He didn't know I'd moved beyond emotional responses to calculated strategy. He was already seated at a corner table when Daniel and I arrived, nursing what looked like an expensive scotch. The confidence in his posture faltered slightly when he saw Daniel accompanying me. I thought we were meeting alone, he said as we sat down. You lost the privilege of private conversations when you threatened Jessica this morning, I replied calmly. His eyes narrowed. She's running to you now? Interesting alliance. We're not here to discuss Jessica, Daniel interjected. Olivia wanted to inform you personally of actions taken today that will affect you significantly. Nathan leaned back, feigning relaxation, though tension showed in the set of his shoulders. Let me guess. You're filing for divorce. hardly unexpected at this point. The divorce is in process, I confirmed, but that's not why we're here. The board unanimously approved disclosure to the SEC regarding your misrepresentation of the Forrester contract and the inflated IPO projections based on that misrepresentation. The color drained from his face. For once, Nathan Mitchell was speechless. The disclosure was submitted approximately 2 hours ago, I continued. It details how you presented growth forecasts to potential underwriters that were predicated on a Forrester expansion that never existed. It also documents the JC Strategies payments and other financial improprieties. You can't do that, he finally managed. You'll tank the company's valuation. Years of work destroyed. The valuation will adjust to reflect reality, not your fantasies, I countered. Horizon is still a valuable company with strong products and loyal customers. We'll recover, especially with honest leadership. Nathan's shock gave way to cold fury. This is about revenge. You couldn't stand that I found someone younger, someone who appreciated me, so you're burning everything down. Daniel started to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. That's not why we're here, Nathan. We're here because you committed fraud. You betrayed not just me, but every employee, every investor, every customer who trusted you. The disclosure isn't revenge, it's accountability. My attorneys will fight this, he threatened. I'll sue for defamation, for wrongful termination. I'll take this all the way to trial if necessary. That would be unwise, Daniel advised coolly. A trial would make public even more details of your conduct, including potentially criminal behavior. The SEC doesn't look kindly on intentional misrepresentation to investors. Criminal? Nathan scoffed, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Securities fraud carries penalties of up to 20 years in federal prison, Daniel stated matter-of-factly. Given the evidence, including testimony from multiple witnesses, prosecutorial interest is likely. Nathan's bravado crumbled visibly. What do you want from me? We're not negotiating, I clarified. We're informing you of actions already taken. But if you're asking about mitigating your personal consequences, full cooperation with the SEC investigation would be advisable. And what about Christopher? Nathan asked, a desperate edge creeping into his voice. Is he implicated too? Christopher's involvement is still being assessed, I replied neutrally. His future with Horizon depends largely on his choices in the coming days. Nathan stared into his scotch, the magnitude of his situation finally sinking in. When he looked up, the arrogance had drained from his expression, replaced by something I'd rarely seen in our 12 years together. Fear. Olivia, please, he said, his voice lower. We can still fix this. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But destroying my career, possibly sending me to prison, is that really what you want? What I want is irrelevant, I replied, surprising myself with how true that felt. This isn't personal anymore, Nathan. It's about doing what's right for the company, for our employees, for all the stakeholders who depended on honest leadership. It was one mistake, he insisted. One set of projections that got out of hand. It wasn't one mistake, I corrected him. It was a pattern of deception that culminated in fraud. You systematically erased my contributions to Horizon. You misused company funds to pay your girlfriend. You manipulated financial projections to inflate our valuation. Each step showed who you really are. He flinched at the assessment. And who exactly do you think I am? Someone who believes rules don't apply to him. Someone who uses people until they're no longer useful, then discards them. Someone who would threaten the mother of his unborn child to protect his reputation. The last point landed like a physical blow. Jessica told you about this morning. She did. She also provided recordings of your threats. Nathan's expression hardened. Always the victim, isn't she? Did she tell you she approached me initially because her father's company was competing with Forrester? That she used me for information? This was new, but not entirely surprising given Jessica's legal background and strategic thinking. She's made mistakes too. The difference is she's trying to correct them, while you're still making excuses. Daniel checked his watch. We should wrap this up. The financial news outlets will be breaking the story soon. I nodded and stood. Nathan, despite everything, we built something important together at Horizon. I'm going to protect it, even if that means protecting it from you. You won't succeed, he said, but the threat sounded hollow. The tech community is small. People know me, trust me. They trusted the version of you that you presented, I corrected. Just like I did. Just like Jessica did. Now everyone will see the reality. As Daniel and I walked away, I felt Nathan's eyes on my back. The gaze of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse around him. Outside, the crisp Denver air filled my lungs as I took my first deep breath in what felt like hours. That was harder than I expected, I admitted to Daniel. You did well, he replied. Compassionate, but firm. He needed to understand the gravity of his situation. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Diane. It's starting, she said without preamble. Bloomberg just ran the story about the SEC disclosure. CNBC is planning coverage for their closing bell segment. How's the internal communication going? I've been personally briefing department heads. Ryan is handling the technical teams. There are questions, concerns, but also a lot of relief that we're being transparent. Any word from Christopher? His resignation letter was on my desk. When I returned from lunch, effective immediately. One less complication to manage. Have security escort him out and revoke all access credentials. I don't trust his loyalty right now. Already done, Diane confirmed. And Olivia? The preliminary feedback from the independent auditors suggests the financial issues may be limited to the Forrester projections and the JC Strategies payments. The core business financials appear sound. That was the first genuinely good news of the day. Keep me updated as they find more. And Diane, thank you for your integrity through all of this. It would have been easier to look the other way. Easier, maybe, but not right, she replied simply. By evening, the story had exploded across financial media. Horizon Technologies discloses potential fraud by former CEO, read the Wall Street Journal headline. CNBC ran a special segment questioning what this meant for tech IPOs generally. LinkedIn was buzzing with industry insiders expressing shock, disappointment, and in some cases, a lack of surprise. I remained in my office long after most employees had gone home, monitoring the coverage and responding to urgent inquiries from key clients and investors. The initial stock impact had been substantial. Our private valuation estimates from venture firms dropped nearly 30% in the first few hours after disclosure. But there were also signs of resilience. Several major customers, including Forrester, had issued statements reaffirming their commitment to Horizon's products. Around 9 p.m., Margaret arrived with takeout food and a determined expression. You need to eat, she insisted. Crisis management requires sustenance. I accepted the container gratefully, suddenly aware I hadn't eaten since breakfast. How bad? Is it out there? About as expected, she replied, settling into the chair across from my desk. The valuation hit is significant but not catastrophic. The SEC has already reached out to schedule initial interviews. Most importantly, the narrative is working in our favor. New leadership discovering and promptly disclosing issues left by the previous CEO. And Nathan? Margaret's expression hardened. His attorney issued a statement calling the allegations misleading and lacking context. Standard defensive posturing. But several industry contacts who've known Nathan for years have reached out to me privately, asking for the real story. His reputation is taking a serious hit. I nodded, picking at the food without much appetite. Is it wrong that I don't feel more satisfaction? He betrayed me personally, professionally. He deserves this downfall. But all I feel is tired. Margaret studied me thoughtfully. That's because you're focused on rebuilding, not revenge. Destruction is easy. Creation takes real effort. We have so much work ahead, I acknowledged. Stabilizing the company, cooperating with the SEC investigation, rebuilding investor confidence. The IPO will be delayed at least 6 months, probably longer. Perhaps that's for the best, Margaret suggested. It gives you time to put your own stamp on Horizon's future rather than executing Nathan's vision. The observation resonated deeply. In focusing on damage control, I hadn't fully processed that Horizon was truly mine to lead now, not just operationally but strategically. The company's direction, culture, priorities, all could be reshaped according to my values, not Nathan's. You're right, I said, feeling a renewal of energy despite the exhaustion. This isn't just about fixing Nathan's mistakes. It's about building the company Horizon should have been all along. Margaret smiled approvingly. Exactly. And if you ask me, that company will be significantly stronger than Nathan's version. As Margaret left, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Watching the news. You're handling it all with incredible grace. If there's anything else I can do to help, just ask. The message reminded me of another loose end that needed addressing. I called Daniel. I know it's late, I began when he answered. It's been that kind of day, he replied. What's on your mind? Jessica. Nathan threatened her about custody and her law license. I'm concerned he might follow through, especially now that the disclosure has damaged his reputation. Daniel considered this. We should document the threats, certainly, and perhaps discuss protective measures, both legal and practical. Could we use the recording she made as leverage? Make it clear to Nathan that if he pursues any action against her, that recording goes public? Possibly, Daniel said cautiously. Though we need to be careful not to cross into extortion territory. Let me think about the best approach. After ending the call, I stood at my office window, looking out at Denver's nighttime skyline. Somewhere out there, Nathan was watching his carefully constructed image crumble. Jessica was sheltering with her sister, protecting herself and her unborn child. And I was standing in the office that had once been his, charting a path forward for the company we had built and he had nearly destroyed. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Nathan had announced his affair at our anniversary dinner, humiliating me in front of colleagues. Now his professional humiliation was playing out publicly, his misdeeds exposed for all to judge. But unlike Nathan, I took no pleasure in his downfall. The satisfaction came not from his suffering, but from the truth finally emerging. Painful, as it was. My phone rang again, this time a Denver number I didn't recognize. Olivia Mitchell, I answered. Ms. Mitchell, this is Agent Carla Rodriguez with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I apologize for the late call, but given the SEC referral regarding Horizon Technologies, we'd like to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. The FBI's involvement meant the situation had escalated beyond regulatory concerns to potential criminal investigation. Of course, my team and I will cooperate fully. I appreciate that, she replied. We'll need to interview all relevant parties, including your former CEO, Mr. Mitchell. I understand. Should I have our legal team contact you to arrange the details? That would be appropriate. And Ms. Mitchell, based on the preliminary information, your prompt disclosure likely protected the company from more severe consequences. That was the right call. After arranging to have our legal team contact Agent Rodriguez in the morning, I finally prepared to leave the office. The day had been one of the most challenging of my professional life, but also oddly clarifying. The path ahead was difficult, but clear. Cooperate with investigators, stabilize the company, rebuild investor confidence, and eventually, resume the path toward IPO, this time with honest projections and ethical leadership. As I gathered my things, I noticed the framed document I'd placed on the wall when I took over, the original Horizon business plan with both our names on it. Despite everything that had happened since, that initial vision had been genuine. Nathan and I had once been partners in the truest sense, building something we both believed in. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of that partnership, that shared purpose. His ambition had clouded his judgment, his ego distorted his perception. The man who had pitched his healthcare software vision to me 15 years ago would never have recognized the person he'd become. Someone willing to commit fraud, betray his wife, and threaten the mother of his child. I touched the frame lightly, acknowledging the grief for what had been lost alongside the determination to move forward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, FBI interviews, continued media scrutiny, employee concerns to address. But tonight, driving home through the quiet streets, I allowed myself a moment of recognition. I had survived the public humiliation of Jessica's pregnancy announcement. I had uncovered Nathan's fraud and taken appropriate action despite the personal cost. I had stepped into leadership not out of vengeance, but out of duty to the company and its stakeholders. The dinner where Jessica announced her pregnancy had seemed like the end of my world. Instead, it had become the catalyst for reclaiming my rightful place, not just at Horizon, but in my own life. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to humiliate me, Nathan and Jessica had set in motion the events that would ultimately lead to his downfall and my ascension. As I pulled into my driveway, the house dark and quiet before me, I felt something unexpected amid the exhaustion and lingering pain. Hope. Not just for Horizon's recovery, but for my own. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, it was truly mine to define. 1 year after the SEC disclosure, I stood at the podium in the Denver Convention Center, addressing the assembled crowd of Horizon employees, investors, and media representatives. The journey from that devastating anniversary dinner to this moment had been arduous, but transformative. Today marks not just Horizon's successful public offering, but a recommitment to the values that should have guided us from the beginning: integrity, transparency, and genuine innovation, I said, looking out at the faces before me. Our IPO valuation may be more modest than once projected, but it's built on truth, sustainable growth, verifiable contracts, and ethical leadership. The stock had opened at $28 per share, exceeding analyst expectations by nearly 15%. The journey to this point had required painful restructuring, intensive cooperation with federal investigators, and the rebuilding of trust with customers and investors alike. Nathan's legacy at Horizon had been completely rewritten. 6 months. After the disclosure, he had accepted a plea deal on securities fraud charges. 2 years in a minimum security facility plus restitution. The tech visionary who once commanded admiration across the industry was now a cautionary tale in business ethics seminars. As I concluded my remarks and the traditional bell-ringing ceremony began, I caught Margaret Reynolds's eye in the front. "Bro." Her approving nod meant more than the applause filling the room. She had been my steadfast ally throughout the turbulent transition, her wisdom guiding key decisions when the path forward seemed most uncertain. The reception afterward was jubilant. Horizon employees, those who had weathered the storm, and the talented newcomers we'd attracted during the rebuilding, celebrated not just the financial milestone, but the company's cultural transformation. The toxic competition and credit stealing that had characterized Nathan's leadership had been replaced by collaboration and proper recognition. Ryan Hernandez, our CTO, approached with champagne flutes. "To the CEO who saved Horizon from itself," he toasted. "To all of us," I corrected, including Diane, who had joined us. This was never a one-person rescue mission. True, Diane agreed, but we needed the right leader to guide us through. Not everyone would have had the courage to disclose those projections knowing the short-term consequences. The celebration continued around us, but my attention was drawn to an unexpected figure entering the reception area, Jessica Cooper, and get ahead of whatever Nathan and Christopher are planning. As I drove home to my empty house, Nathan had moved out to a downtown condo. I felt a strange sense of clarity. The path forward was complicated and would likely be painful for Horizon in the short term. The IPO would be delayed, our valuation adjusted downward, our reputation requiring careful rehabilitation. But for the first time since Jessica's announcement at that disastrous dinner, I wasn't reacting to Nathan's actions. I was charting my own course, protecting the company I had helped build, establishing ethical leadership, creating something sustainable from the wreckage of Nathan's deceptions. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: the board disclosure, the SEC notification, the inevitable public scrutiny. But tonight, driving through the Denver darkness with mountains silhouetted against the night sky, I felt something unexpected: freedom. Nathan had betrayed me, tried to erase me, attempted to reduce me to the role of supportive wife rather than founding partner. Now I was reclaiming not just my rightful position, but my vision for what Horizon could be. A company built on integrity, innovation, and authentic relationships. Let Nathan and Christopher plot their counter-moves. I had truth on my side, and a growing certainty that whatever came next, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The emergency board meeting began at 7 a.m. sharp. The early hour hadn't deterred. Full attendance. Even Christopher Barnes had returned from his leave of absence to sit scowling at the far end of the table. I suspected Nathan's influence in his sudden reappearance. "Thank you all for accommodating this urgent session," I began, meeting each board member's eyes as I spoke. "We've discovered serious issues that require immediate attention and disclosure." Margaret nodded encouragingly, while Raj and Elizabeth exchanged concerned glances. James Peterson looked tired, as if he hadn't slept well. Christopher's hostility was palpable. "As you know, we've been conducting a thorough review of company operations since the leadership transition. What we've found regarding the Forrester contract and our IPO projections is troubling." I laid out the facts methodically: the misrepresented expansion, the inflated growth projections, the potential securities implications, while Daniel distributed documentation packages containing the evidence, including the materials Jessica had provided. In essence, I concluded, Nathan was presenting growth forecasts to potential IPO underwriters that were based on a Forrester expansion that doesn't exist and was never formally agreed to. This constitutes a material misrepresentation that could be construed as securities fraud. The silence that followed was profound. Even Christopher looked shaken. Elizabeth Carter was the first to recover. "What is our exposure here?" Daniel stepped in. "If we self-disclose to the SEC immediately and revise all projections before the IPO process advances further, we can mitigate the legal risk significantly. There would likely be penalties and certainly a delay in the offering, but we could avoid the most severe consequences." "And if we don't?" James asked. "Criminal fraud charges for those involved in creating or knowingly presenting the false projections," Daniel replied bluntly, "plus shareholder lawsuits, regulatory penalties, and potentially catastrophic damage to the company's reputation and valuation." Christopher finally spoke up. "This is absurd. Nathan wouldn't jeopardize the company he built. There must be some misunderstanding about the Forrester discussions." I slid a document across the table. "This is a statement from William Turner, CEO of Forrester, confirming that no expansion agreement was reached or imminent. He's prepared to testify to that effect if necessary." Christopher paled visibly as he scanned the document. Margaret leaned forward. "I motion that we authorize immediate disclosure to the SEC and issue revised projections based on accurate growth forecasts." "Second," said Raj quickly. Christopher raised a hand in weak protest. shouldn't we at least hear Nathan's explanation first? He may have had ongoing discussions with Forrester that weren't formalized yet. Bill Turner and I went through every communication, I countered. There was never any substantive discussion of an immediate threefold expansion. Nathan? Invented it to inflate our valuation. The legal reality is clear, Daniel added. Delay increases our collective liability. As board members, you have fiduciary duties that could be compromised by failing to act on this information. That settled it. The vote was unanimous, even Christopher recognizing the futility of opposition in the face of such overwhelming evidence. There's one more matter, I said once the disclosure motion had passed. Exactly. Eleanor used to say the true measure of leadership isn't what you build, but what you refuse to compromise in building it. Horizon under Nathan was compromised to its core. You restored its integrity while preserving its potential. As the evening concluded and the last guests departed, I found myself alone in the convention center's atrium. The banner announcing Horizon's IPO still hung prominently, our revised logo capturing the company's evolution. Same name but different identity, just like me. I thought back to that devastating dinner a year ago, when Jessica had stood with champagne in hand to announce her pregnancy. The memory no longer carried the same sharp pain. Time and perspective had transformed it from an ending into a beginning, the catalyst that had set everything else in motion. My phone buzzed with a text from Raj Patel, who had become a close advisor during the rebuilding. HRZN up another 3% in after-hours trading. The market believes in your vision. I smiled at the validation, but knew the stock price was just one measure of success, and not the most important one. The true achievement was less visible: the culture we'd created, the ethical foundation we'd established, the talented team we'd assembled. As I left the convention center, the crisp Denver evening enveloped me. The mountains stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, their permanence a reminder that even our most significant personal dramas are small against the backdrop of time. My driver was waiting to take me home, but I found myself requesting a detour. The office first, please. Just briefly. Horizon's headquarters was quiet at this hour. Just a few dedicated engineers still working on projects too engaging to abandon for the celebration. They offered congratulations as I passed, their genuine enthusiasm another testament to the company's transformation. In my office, I went directly to the framed business plan, the document that had started everything 15 years ago. Next to it now hung the bell I'd rung at the stock exchange, a symbol of Horizon's new chapter. I ran my fingers lightly over the glass covering the faded paper, tracing the names that had once represented such partnership and promise: Nathan Mitchell and Olivia Walker. I had reclaimed my maiden name after the divorce, a small but significant act of reclaiming my identity separate from Nathan. Olivia Walker, CEO of Horizon Technologies. The title still felt momentous sometimes, though I'd grown comfortable with its weight. My phone rang. Bill Turner from Forrester, calling to congratulate me on the IPO. Impressive debut, he said when I answered. The analysts are already reassessing their targets upward. Just delivering on promises we can actually keep, I replied. He laughed appreciatively. Revolutionary concept in tech. Listen, we should discuss expanding MediSync to our West Coast operations, for real this time. No smoke and mirrors, just solid business. I'd like that, I said, savoring the irony. The expansion Nathan had fabricated was now potentially becoming reality, not through deception, but through trust and demonstrated value. After ending the call, I took one final look around the office before heading home. The space had been completely redesigned, no trace of Nathan's tenure remaining. His awards and vanity photos replaced by team recognition and meaningful milestones. His dark, imposing furniture exchanged for a warmer, more collaborative arrangement. This was my company now, not through manipulation or deception, but through honest leadership and hard work. The path to this point had been painful, marked by betrayal and public humiliation. But standing here on IPO day, I couldn't regret any of it. Jessica's announcement at that anniversary dinner had seemed like the end. Instead, it had been the beginning of something I couldn't have imagined, reclaiming not just my professional contributions, but my personal power. As I left the building and headed home, I thought about the strange symmetry of life's most difficult moments, often leading to its most meaningful transformations. Nathan had orchestrated what he thought would be my greatest humiliation. Instead, he had inadvertently set me on the path to my greatest triumph. The company he loved now thrived under my leadership. The future he had jeopardized with his fraud was now secure through transparency. The wife he had betrayed and underestimated now occupied the position he had prized above all else. It wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about justice, restoration, rebuilding something better from the wreckage of betrayal. As my car wound through the Denver streets toward home, I felt a deep sense of completion. Not because Nathan had lost, but because integrity had won. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.